Well, let's get started. It's funny. I was doing a presentation on Monday. So technology is one thing that creates stress in my life. And I was at this space, and I couldn't get on the internet. You know, I was supposed to start in like 3 minutes, and it just wouldn't connect to the internet. I started feeling it, started sweating, and then I ended up using my phone as a hotspot. So it all worked out good. But I got to use it as an example of noticing, tuning in, and just letting it go and breathe. So anyway, those things are always going on. So yeah, let's get started. This is our last class, official class, I should say, in terms of our last practice. So I'm super excited about today, just because it kind of gives us a new angle to think about in terms of mindfulness today. And then in 2 weeks when we meet, it really just kind of a wrap-up session. That we won't be here for the full time, but just really it's nice to have that closure piece. We know we love closure, and so it also holds you accountable to practice this one last practice for the next 2 weeks. So it's our last practice. So let's just go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about cultivating a generative me. So as always, we'll do our quick review, building that self-understanding and awareness. We can continue to learn about ourselves, become an expert, and we can create that change from the inside out. No matter where we are in our journey, in our life, we're constantly noticing new things about ourselves, and so we always want to keep that top of mind. So some brain paradoxes that are kind of fun to think about. So the private brain paradox is, though we think of thoughts and feelings as private events, they are inherently social. Feelings can roll through 2 or more brains and bodies at once. And I see we have a little fuzziness again. And that refers to brain fact number, whatever that number is. No brain's an island, right? Because we affect each other. And very much so, we're going to be talking about that today. But it's the power of one person. We all know that, right? You can have one person come into a room and the whole dynamic changes. And they don't have to say a word, right? And that's the power we have. And so so we want to just realize that, which is one reason we want to take care of ourselves. Dang it. Sorry about that, guys. Rational brain paradox. The way we invest our attention, our time, and our energy shapes our lives. Yet we are frequently more reactive than proactive in our choices. We know that. That refers to the fact that we're on autopilot. We have that emotional tag, that we're a novelty junkie, that we create those stories, that we have to get off autopilot to create the neural habits in our brain. So who's in charge paradox? Our mind guides our brain when we're conscious, though it generally lets our brain run the show. And I love this. So we need to use the mind change the brain to change the mind for the better, because we kind of have that hardwire in our brain we talked about, and those are those go-to pathways, that hardwire that's in there. Our mind is how we can change those hardwires to help us create the life we want. So we want to be in charge instead of our brain being in charge. While certainly it's okay for it to be in charge sometimes, we're going to be able to be mindful if we're in charge. So, quick review of attention, right? We know that attention is our brain's gatekeeper, so whatever we're allowing in is where our life is going to be. It determines our brain's content, so whatever we allow in is what's going to be filling up our brain. And we know that attention is selective. Now, isn't that funny? See, I'm so curious about this. Like, why would one sentence be clear and the other 2 fuzzy? It just doesn't make sense. Like, you think it would all be fuzzy or all be clear.
Is your slide using a different font?
It doesn't look like it, but maybe it looks like a different size.
It could be a font that's not on that computer or something.
Is it to divert our attention?
Maybe it loaded last and got sped up.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe it's the shorter of these, right? It's just very, if I had time, I would. So what I have learned from my own curiosity of this situation is that if I put it in present mode from edit mode, it eliminates it. But But since we're a little bit late, do you want me to try that, or do you want me to just keep going?
We'll see how it goes.
Okay, we'll just keep going. So just put your goggles on. And so what we intend to grows, right? Whatever we're paying attention to, we know that. Whatever we're paying attention to is where our life is going to be.
Fuzzy font?
Fuzzy font, we're not going to pay attention to that because it's really, it doesn't need a negative emotional tag. It is what it is, right? We're just going to let it go. Of course, we have our 3 practices, right? That justice, our calming, our open, which is that receptive, that mind chatter, noticing those thoughts, and then of course our vivid attention. Creating some space so we can gather facts about things. Anyone have any comments about doing any of these in the last couple of weeks? Anything that was helpful? Anybody still doing any of these? They want to share? Just see a few comments. Anybody wants to share? Okay. Well, I had to do just this when the internet didn't connect on Monday. And then I did this one naturally, just to gather some facts. It is what it is. Like, it doesn't need to take me to downward spiral because then I get all flustered and I'm trying to present and I'm already, and so I really have to be mindful when I get in that heightened state of stress that I just take a few minutes, or, well, it's more like 30 seconds, but just to get present before I present on mindfulness, kind of an important thing. But, yeah. So, our second pillar, attitude, right? We know that attitude practices empower us to step back and view our situation with a compassionate mindset that accepts the existence of what is. They also encourage us to respond with curiosity in order to build our capacity to fully understand what it is that drives us. So noticing those attitudes that we bring to the table. Has anybody experimented with an attitude of shifting one of those 3 ingredients? Remember, we have our emotional tag, our belief, or our physiological response. Anybody experiment the last couple of weeks? Shifting an attitude? Nobody did. Have you noticed any attitudes you have? Don't all talk at once today. Okay.
That's why we need Stephanie here.
She gets things all fired up.
She
Gets
starts that
people-
conversation.
Yes. Okay. Well, we want to continue thinking about our attitudes. They're always popping up. I mean, they're always changing. We can notice an attitude today that we didn't embody yesterday or ever before. Certainly some of those attitudes have been around for a long time. Of course, our micro practices, curiosity, searching for more, taking those blinders off, compassion, giving ourselves kindness, tenderness, being our own best friend, and then of course our mustard seed practice. And sometimes we just need to shine our light on the good and savor that and fill up. So we're building your toolbox here. AIM, we started with 2 sessions ago, and of course AIM is about those pathways I want to grow, right? Where am I going from here? We talked a little bit about that target we're shooting for. What do I want to accomplish with my life, right? Who is the person I would like to be, and how do I create that life that I want to live? Because even in the midst of a lot of things we can't control, there are a lot of things we can control. We can control how we react, how we respond, the mindset we bring to the table, how we address those attitudes in the present moment, how we end our own unnecessary suffering. There's just so many things that we can cultivate within us to help us move in that direction, even if it's the things that we can't control. We talked a little bit about Inspired AIM was our first practice. That was that big yes, right? That spirited vision. That was filling up because we know inspiration gives us those sacred moments. They motivate us and they nourish us, right? So they fill us up so that we can keep on keeping on. We can be inspired by all kinds of things. And so that was practicing your just one thing. That was just one example of filling up with inspiration. Certainly, even just being mindful of things around you that bring you joy. Certainly, mustard seeds could turn into inspiration. So they all kind of start to overlap. But we really have to be intentional about looking for inspiration and also identifying what does inspire. Because what inspires me may not inspire you or you or you. So it's kind of unique to us. So that's where our curiosity might come into play. Like, what do I get jazzed up about? You know, what do I really feel energized by? And so really kind of teasing that out so that maybe we can filter that into our life a little bit more. We know we have to, if we want to keep on keeping on, we got to fill up. As people at work, as parents, as people in our community. Okay, last session's practice was cultivating the determined aim. Okay, I'm going to ask for some input here. Since this is our freshest practice, that was the big no. That was about pruning and grafting. Remember? So we were pruning away things. Since I can't remember if we talked about that. Pruning away things that aren't working. So we started out with our triggers, and then our action or reaction. Our question was, does our action align? Does it move us toward our aim of who we want to be? And if not, we want to take this pause between. We can insert a go-to phrase to help us navigate it, to help us change that action that better moves us towards our aim. And so you figured out kind of a practice plan. So pruning was really, I discern the qualities I don't want to continue to cultivate. Because when we're on autopilot, we kind of just do those. We've been doing them for so long, and when we can stop and push that pause button and really decide, is that really something that I want to continue to do? Does it make me be that person I want to be? And then we have to graft in, discerning the quality I do want. So I'm pruning those ones that aren't working, and then I'm grafting in the ones that are working for me. And how do I do that? Is just when I notice X happening, I'll do Y. So our go-to list of phrases might be that didn't work, I'll try something else. What's the worst that could happen? Okay, that phrase, I said that to my brother who is a high school counselor. He's like, I would never tell a teenager that. Like, okay. So yes, not every phrase works for every group of people. But for a lot of us who perhaps may have the trigger of fear, what's the worst that could happen could be a really good go-to phrase. What's the worst that could happen if I actually go to that event that I'm a little anxious about because I fear crowds or, whatever. So I think that there's lots of places for that, but maybe not with teens. I don't have time for that negative thought, anxiety, fear, worry. This moment right now, it is what it is. So our practice was you came up with a trigger and your current action, and then how that aligned with your aim. And then this trigger was going to be the same, and you're going to have a new action. And so your task was to come up with something that happens often so that you could practice it as many times as you could, because we know that if we can do it often, it's going to lead us to building that habit a little bit quicker and easier. So, anybody have a practice plan they'd like to share? Alan!
I'll step in for Stephanie. So, some of you might know this about me, but I like to solve people's problems. And not everybody wants me to solve their problems. Even though they present their problems to me, they still don't want them solved. They just want to complain about them. I say that half tongue-in-cheek, but one of the things I want to be is a better listener. And you can't listen if you're solving a problem for somebody. And so when someone presents a trouble or a struggle or something that I have a solution for them, instead of giving them that solution, I have that's my trigger is they presented something to me that I believe is a problem to be solved, which is almost everything. And then the action would be, well, here's what I would do, or here's what I think you should do, or whatever I would usually have said. And instead now I just validate that I understand their concern, I can understand their hardship, and allow them to maybe continue working through it so that maybe they can solve it all by themselves with just me helping them understand what it might be. So it works for you guys, it works for my children, it works for my wife, and it works for myself sometimes. Where
Well, and it leads you to be the person you want to be
yes, well, getting closer, and on the path there.
on the path.
Yeah,
Right. It's
it'll be a
step.
never-ending pathway.
Well, of course. It's we're never going to get to our aims. It's the direction we want to always be moving.
I
Absolutely.
can always be a better listener. I can always be better.
Absolutely. Not a destination. Anybody else?
I have one. So when someone shares something about about themselves or their experience or their achievement or something, my natural response is to share like my similar trait or my similar experience. In my mind, that's just my way of like relating to the person and showing that I'm like in the conversation. But I think it comes off sometimes as I'm trying to one up them, which is not my intention, but I recognize that happens. So I have a hard time saying nothing. So my strategy is I can congratulate, compliment, or ask a question, and those are the only choices.
So how's it been going?
It's like I've been doing it, but at this point it feels a little bit disingenuous, but I think with time maybe it'll be more natural.
Does it feel awkward?
Yeah, like it feels like I'm making the conversation awkward, but
Has anyone noticed around you?
not that they've said anything.
Well, and I think just like any new habit, it feels a little uncomfortable because it's not your norm, right? You've been doing the same thing for a long time. So I think any time we try something new, we're stepping outside our box a little bit, it's going to feel a little, just different. Keep at it. Yeah, I love that.
I forgot to share my go-to phrase.
Oh, yeah, what was your go-to phrase?
Well, I can't say all of it out loud, but shut the front door is what I tell myself, so that I don't just blurt out. Here's the solution.
Okay.
Shut the
There you go.
front door,
Uh-huh.
and it keeps me quiet. And that's how you listen, is by shutting your mouth.
There
You
you go.
can't listen well when you're talking.
Very good.
I know you guys have a hard time believing that I tell myself that.
No, it's the keeping quiet part.
Thank you, Paige.
So
I don't know
I
if you really do that with your kids. I know your kids are younger than mine.
well, this is just in your mind.
Yes.
Your
No,
go-to
yeah,
phrase.
that's my go-to
It's just
phrase
in his
in my
mind.
head.
No, I mean not helping them solve their
Oh, the problem.
No, it is actually helpful. Because until they ask for the problem to be solved, they don't know that they have a problem to be solved. You lead them to asking for their problem to be solved if that's truly what they need. You can lead any person to that point. Until they get to the point where they want you to solve the problem, your solution is going to be dismissed entirely. That's my experience thus far.
Well, I practiced one of my go-to phrases on Monday. So I drove to Joplin, and my mom, who is 77, likes to come with me when I go out of town. And so she just likes to be in the car. And so we had 3 hours. And she got to talk for 3 hours, which I love. But there are things about all of our loved ones that kind of drive us crazy. And she has this thing that she makes this sound. Have I told you this?
Mm-hmm.
Have I told you?
No, you told us.
Have I told all of you? Yes. And so in the car ride, so my go-to phrase was, I love you. I know you won't be here forever. It is what it is, right? But I know, but you have to keep at it, because otherwise it's just that spotlight just wants to go on there and then, take you under. So, that was my Monday, but it was good. I savored that time. Anybody else? Oh, come on. Did anybody, okay, nod if you did it. Okay, there's some people who forgot.
Okay, I have to admit, so I missed last session, and actually it was really hard to hear you on the video.
How was it?
I agree.
And so I have to full disclosure.
Okay, we will forgive you. That's okay. Well, sometimes life hijacks us, but this really goes back to, if you want to reap the rewards, you have to put in the effort. And obviously, if you couldn't hear it and weren't here or whatever, that's understandable. But, just for everybody else, and there's no shame. It's like life, this happens, When I started working on mindfulness, 3 weeks would pass and be like, I haven't done a mindfulness for 3 weeks. Oh my gosh. Because it's new. So we really just have to make an effort, and that's where that practice plan, remember we talked about, we can preload that response. We are so much more, effective in our being able to deal with that and to really make a change. And so it's just really about you. It's just going to help you in your life. So for what it's worth, if you didn't have a chance to practice this, maybe you couldn't think of a trigger. I know sometimes when you're on the spot, when we're in class together, it's like, I'm sure I have them, I just can't think of any. And then sometimes you leave and it just goes out the window. So this is something you're going to always circle back around to, because there's always going to be triggers. Whether it's coworkers, family members, kids, drivers, the weather, whatever. So you can always circle back around. So today is our last practice. It's cultivating a generative aim. And that's exactly what it is. It's generative aim. And it's really this me-we perspective. So it's really about this giving and receiving. And I love this lesson because so up until this point, our mindfulness has really been about our journey. Me and myself and my thoughts and this thing that's happening inside of me and outside of me, and how can I navigate these emotions and notice and build this awareness. And all of this has been this journey, this kind of journey for ourselves. And this is the place where we start to take our own mindfulness and allow it to ripple out. Because we affect each other. We have a reciprocal relationship with every living being. We affect each other. Whether you want to or not, you do. And so this is where our mindfulness not only affects us, but starts to affect the people around us and beyond. So this means that we realize that when we take care of the me, we are helping take care of the we. And when we take care of the we, we're helping take care of the we. In fact, research shows that our life and how we live it not only impacts our tribe, but it impacts people 3 degrees out. 3 degrees beyond, 2 degrees beyond your circle that's closest to you. That's how much we affect each other. So imagine a world if we could all be in that place of mindfulness and health and how we can have that ripple out to other people. So Rick Schneider is a researcher who is a researcher on hope. And he says that I am not an island. Just like my brain is not an island, I'm not an island, right? I didn't get to be who I am because of me alone. I've been affected by the we, and the we has been affected by me. People have shaped me. There's been my experiences, my history, everything up until this point affects me, and then I affect everyone else. So we also really want to be thinking of this in this moment of generative aim, is that we are truly all more alike than different. Fundamentally, we have all the same needs, desires, hungers, as human beings on this earth. You know, we're all unique, and our stories are unique, and our experiences are unique, but there's a lot of things that we are very much the same on. So you might be wondering this picture. Anybody remember Honey Boo Boo? Yeah. So this is Honey Boo Boo, and Mama June, and Sugar Bear. So this was an experience that I had, kind of this epiphany that for me has really been life-changing. And my family and I, we were down in Florida and on vacation, and we had rented a house, and that day it was raining, so we had to stay inside. And my kids were probably middle school, high school-ish, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school. And they were in the family room, and I just wanted to spend time with them, and they were all watching Honey Boo Boo. Now, I will tell you, prior to that, I had quite an attitude about reality TV. It was ridiculous. I would come into your room like, I can't believe these people, like, this is just not right. Some of you may have that attitude. And I've since addressed that attitude because it really doesn't matter what I think about reality TV. And I haven't added to my own suffering with that, so I've let that go. But at this point, and my kids would always be like, Mom, if you're just gonna complain, then just leave the room, you know. So I sat down. Of course, I started immediately making judgment, and they said that, and so I just piped down. And I sat there and I started watching this episode. Now, let me give you some background. I also had been reading on this vacation a book by Barbara Fredrickson. She's the one we referenced in Positivity. And she wrote a book called Love 2.0. It's just really about how we all can look at love in a different way. We can self-generate love. And she talked about in that video clip, if you remember, about a loving kindness, a study that on loving kindness meditation, which is actually our practice today. But anyway, having said that, I think my brain was kind of primed to have an epiphany. And so I was thinking about the book, and I was sitting there watching this. And this episode, Sugar Bear had proposed to Mama June. And Mama June was like, I don't know if I should accept, like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And so she goes to her girls, and she's like, what do you think I should do? And they were like, we love Sugar Bear, we think you should marry him. And so she was so happy. And so then she said yes, and then they all started working out because they were going to prep for the wedding, doing sit-ups and jumping jacks and all this stuff. And what I realized in this moment was that while I can disagree with how this woman raises her children, talks to her children, chooses to be on TV, at the end of the day, we were more like different. She wanted a family. She wanted to be loved. She wanted her children to be happy. She wanted to look good for her wedding day, right? And it was like, oh my gosh, I can disagree with choices that she's making and her family's making, but I can still respect and honor her as a fellow human being on this earth. And I think that this is really an important lesson for all of us to be embodied in this day and age, where we have lots of opinions and lots of division and lots of perspectives and beliefs. And if we can realize that we are more alike than different, that it's okay to disagree about things, but I can still honor you as a fellow human being. And I will tell you that epiphany for me has changed everything. I no longer, and it helps me with that no judgment piece, because so much of that, what I realized is that when we talk with people who have different opinions than us, for some reason we start lumping together like, well, then I don't like you, and this judgment piece starts to happen. And that if we can tease that out a little bit, we can see that you as a fellow human being doesn't have to be associated with the choices you're making, you know? And so it's really helped me see people in a different light, in a way that helps me move toward my aim, honestly, of being someone without judgment and respectful. And it's not easy, I will tell you. I am challenged with this in many ways, especially things that I feel passionate about, that is different from other people's views. But mindfully, you know, you just kind of process it and realize that they think that this is what's right, and I think that this is what's right, and that's okay. We can learn from each other, hopefully. So that's my Honey Boo Boo story. I was grateful for that experience because it really has changed everything. So I want to share, too, a little bit about the Blue Zones. So has anybody heard of the Blue Zones here? Okay. So this is a woman who is 102 years old, and she still, at the time of this picture, got up every day and went out to the rice fields to work. So the Blue Zones is National Geographic hired a gentleman he spent about 5 years roaming the world. And what he found was he was looking for hot spots where people lived to be 100 years and older. And once he found those hot spots, he interviewed them, centurions, and he teased out all that information, and he came up with 9 character traits, or 9 things that they embodied, that they all embodied, that were the same. So, the 9 things were, first of all, they moved naturally. Now, they didn't necessarily have a huge exercise routine, but they weren't sedentary people, right? So they were just mindful of the fact that they were moving on some level. Number 2, they knew their sense of purpose. And I always joke, well, they did have 100 years to figure that out. But immediately when you ask them, why were you born? What was your purpose on earth? They immediately. 3, they knew how to downshift. So they knew how to, decompress, whether it was throughout the day or at the end of the day. They knew how to do that for themselves. They had the 80% rule when eating. I love this one, and I've really been trying to work on this one. So when they were 80% full, they stopped eating. And that's really challenging, I think, in our culture, where we get these portions that are like for 2 people on our plate, and so sometimes that's difficult, but that's really helping us, if we can be mindful of that, we can tune into where am I? Am I about 80%? Are those 2 extra bites going to put me over 80%? And sometimes now at dinner I'll be like, oh, I'm at 90. That was not good. Like I shouldn't have eaten that last thing, because it's when you start getting used to this 80% place, it feels so much better. I mean, this is just me personally feeling this way, but because when you get too full, anyway. Number 5, they had a plant slant to their diet. So it wasn't that they were vegan, vegetarian. It wasn't that they were anything radical, but they had a higher concentration of fruits and vegetables in their diet. In particular, most of the things I believe that in those plants were indigenous of where they lived, often. Number 6, they had wine at 5 with others. Who doesn't love that one? Yeah. I know. Oh darn. I need to have my wine.
Does that also apply to 4?
It applied. So, I think probably the antioxidants of red wine certainly, but with others is really key, right? It's this connection. We know that we need each other. We know that we were designed and built to be social. Now, certainly we have tendencies, all of us, whether we're a little bit more introvert or extrovert, but we all still need connection. This is really where, and it's just a side note, where it's wreaking havoc on our children because we need eye-to-eye contact. We need eye-to-eye contact to reap the benefits of not only health, happiness, but longevity. And our kids are spending so much time on screens that they're not having this eye-to-eye contact. And so if you have little ones in your house or in your family, I encourage you to really think about increasing that eye-to-eye contact. That's how kids learn empathy. We're finding the research showing that our young kiddos who have been on screens for a long time, a lot of their life, are not understanding empathy because they haven't learned to notice, find nuances in people's faces, because you can't learn that on a screen. You don't see that on a screen. So that's a whole side note, sorry. Number 7, they belong to a faith-based community. It wasn't anything in particular, but we know from research that spirituality is important for our health and happiness and longevity. Now, what that spirituality is for you to figure out if that's something that you want to aim to live to be 100. But I think not only is it spirituality, but it's also that sense of community, of belongingness to something, having that support group, those people who, are part of your tribe. Number 8, they put loved ones first. But that also means that they love themselves and others. And number 9, they seek the right tribe. So they surrounded themselves with people who built them up and didn't tear them down. So if we look at this list, interestingly enough, all of these are very mindful-ish. But somebody said in another training, they're like, well, this is mindful because we have to tune in to how full we are. And even this is mindful, being mindful of adding more fruits and vegetables in your diet. So I think they really all are very mindful-ish. So there's this website called bluezones.com, and you can go to it, and it's really quite interesting. And you can take this little 5-minute quiz, and it'll generate for you, basically asks you like a little basic health history, your lifestyle, how you eat, your exercise routine, and things like that. And it'll generate for you your age that, according to your answers, are, and your expected life expectancy. How long you're expected to live. Okay, and that might sound like, ooh, do I want to know? But this is the cool part. The cool part is then it tells you how to increase your longevity. So I think the last time I try and do it like once a year to see if I can get it up. I think it was like 86.7. I'm like, what? I'm going to live to be 100. That's not good enough. But then it gives you lists. So like, if you just add 2 more servings of whole grains in your diet, you can add 6 months to your lifespan. If you just exercise 2 more times a week for 30 minutes apiece, you can add 3 years and 5 months to your lifespan. So it gives you specific things to increase your longevity, which I like. I like that about that. So it kind of gives you a place to go from there. Okay, so our practice is cultivating this generative aim, and I love this visual because we reflect each other. The me reflects the we, and the we reflects the me, and it's this giving receiving. So I'm going to lead you through. So this is our meditation. So we're back to a meditation. I'm going to guide you through it. So what this is going to be is first. We have these phrases, and first I'm going to have you imagine someone you love in your mind, whether it's a pet or loved one. There's lots of people, things that come to mind, but we're just going to choose one, and then in our mind we're just going to offer them some phrases of loving kindness. And so I'm going to say them to you, and you'll just repeat them to yourself in your head. And then we're going to imagine ourselves and offer ourselves loving kindness. And then we're going to imagine someone we have difficulty with. And we're going to offer them loving kindness.
Don't everybody make that me, please.
And then we're going to offer it to, and this, you totally can make it your own, but we might do our city, and then our country, and then our world. Okay? So we're taking our own mindfulness and we're allowing it to spread. Okay? So both feet on the floor, sitting up nice and straight, hands in your lap, and getting good airflow. As always, you certainly can lower your gaze or close your eyes to block out that stimuli, but we're just going to begin by noticing our breath. Noticing that life-giving air. As we breathe in and breathe out. Allowing our breath to slow and deepen with each breath cycle. Of course, your brain may notice the ticking of the clock, or perhaps a sensation of going as your chair is moving. And just notice and bring your attention back to your breath. Open your brain to home, to get to the present moment. And I'd like you to imagine in your mind an image of someone you love. Again, lots of people come to mind. Just pick one and some loving kindness phrases. And say them out loud and make you feel safe. Make you feel loved. Make you feel accepted. May you live with ease, even in the midst of hardship. I'd like you to imagine yourself, just perhaps what you look like when you look in the mirror. No judgment. It's a simple image of yourself. We're going to offer ourselves loving kindness phrases. May I feel safe. May I feel loved. May I live with ease even in the midst of struggle. I'd like you to imagine something difficult to you. Put their image in your mind. And offer these phrases. Make you feel safe. May you feel loved. Make you feel accepted. May you live with ease even in the midst of hardship. Now let's imagine a whole city, all of Kansas City. And let's send loving kindness to every person in your city. May you feel safe. May you feel loved. May you feel accepted. May you live with ease even in the midst of hardship. Now let's imagine our whole country, every state, every city, every town, every person. May you feel safe. May you feel loved. May you feel accepted. May you live with ease even in the midst of struggle. And lastly, let's imagine our whole world. Every continent, every country, every village, every person, whatever that looks like in your life. Knowing that we all hunger for the same things. May we all feel safe. May we all feel loved. May we all feel accepted. May we all live with ease even in the midst of hardship. Bring our attention back to our breath. Back to that life-giving air as we breathe in, breathe out. Savoring the sense of peace we've cultivated within. Grateful for this moment. And slowly open your eyes. Anybody relaxed? I'm kind of relaxed. How was that? Was it hard to imagine? Did you find, were you able to focus? Offer those phrases? Good. Good.
I always struggle with finding someone I have hardship with,
Well, that's a good thing, I
I
guess.
guess.
So this practice, again, this practice can be done a variety of ways. I will tell you, it certainly can be done in a meditation, or it can just be done. Oftentimes, I am not in a meditation when I do it. So sometimes, so we know from the work of Barbara Fredrickson that we can cultivate the internal physiological response of love by just offering a total stranger love. And they don't even have to know it, but we can reap the benefits of it. So, for instance, sometimes I'll be somewhere and you just notice somebody who's having a bad day, right? Maybe you don't even know. Maybe it's a server at the restaurant or the checkout person, right? And so we can just offer in our mind whatever we think they need. May you feel peace. May you feel less stress. May you feel hope. May you feel, whatever it is we think that they might need, right? Because everybody, no matter who they are, is carrying a heavy load. We may not see it, we may not know it, but they are. And so instead of getting angry and really taking it personal, we can just maybe offer that to them, reap the benefits, but then also, putting that out there, even if it's just in our own mind, for them to hopefully receive. Or sometimes I'm sitting in the car and I look over the car next to me and I'm like, I'm going to send them loving kindness, right? So, and it doesn't have to be that whole thing. It could just be I do it for someone else and for me, and then bike. Everybody at bike. Or everybody in Blue Screens. Or, so tweak it, make it your own. This can also be a loving kindness, or this also can be compassion. Sometimes I just notice a compassionate practice. Sometimes I just notice, I don't know, I'm feeling off. And I just offer myself some phrases. May you feel whatever today, right now. May you feel like you can do this. May you feel encouraged. May you let that go. Whatever, right? Whatever phrase you need. It doesn't even need to make sense. It just needs to make sense to you. So that can be also a compassionate practice. So whatever that looks like, this is our practice. But I think it really illustrates that no matter where we are, who we are, where we live, we all fundamentally hunger for the same things, right? We do, for safety, for love, and for acceptance, and for peace, and for hope, and for goodness, and, all of those things. And so this is going to just really connect with that. So, any questions on that? No? So this week, take a closer look at the Blue Zone traits. Are there ones you'd like to work on? Go to bluezones.com to take a quiz if you want. It might be fun. See if you get some helpful hints. It might be a little nudge to maybe increase something in your life to help you, should you desire to live to be 100. Practice your loving kindness meditation at least 3 times each day in whatever way is meaningful to you. So these are those micro moments, right? We're building an awareness of our micro moments. So maybe it's I do it in that moment before I head back to my desk to work after lunch, or I'm sitting in the parking lot and I just take 30 seconds to offer loving kindness, do that meditation on whatever level. But this isn't meant to be added, right, to your day. This is about plugging it in those micro moments throughout your day. Okay? And I think when you start realizing and starting to have that mindset of looking at others as being more alike, different, it changes us in a way that we can, I think, connect with people in a different way. So, our quote to end with is, the only way the world can change